The massive space station called Xerion Prime drifted silently through the void, its surface covered in towers that stretched for miles into the darkness. Inside the Grand Council Chamber, beings that had existed since before Earth's dinosaurs gathered around a table made from crystallized starlight. This was their 1,000-year meeting, a routine as old as human civilization itself. The Veiled Tar were the strangest of all. They had no solid bodies, just shimmering forms of pure energy that danced through the air like living lightning. When they spoke, their voices echoed from everywhere and nowhere at once. The Chronari looked like walking mountains of crystal, each one the size of a building, their bodies pulsing with soft colors that changed with their moods. Then there were the Nebulites, who appeared as swirling clouds of gas held together by their own willpower. Commander Thalven had been attending these meetings for the last 50,000 years. To him, it was just another day at work. He floated near the viewing wall, his energy form crackling softly as he reviewed reports on his species' latest expansion. The Veiled Tar had just absorbed 17 star systems, turning their planets into pure energy to feed their ever-growing civilization. It was efficient, clean, and perfectly legal according to galactic law. The other species were discussing similar projects. The Chronari had just finished converting 12 worlds into crystal gardens, beautiful but completely lifeless. The Nebulites had drained the atmospheres from 30 planets to add to their collective mass. They called it progress. They called it evolution. They called it the natural order of things. These ancient beings had divided the galaxy between themselves millions of years ago. They had rules, agreements, and perfectly organized systems for everything. Younger species were allowed to exist, but only to a certain point. Once they started reaching for the stars, well, accidents happened. Solar flares destroyed their worlds. Asteroids appeared from nowhere. Plagues swept through their populations. It was always tragic, always natural, and always final. The chamber hummed with polite conversation in a dozen alien languages. Trade routes were negotiated, territorial boundaries were adjusted, and resources were distributed. Everything was calm, orderly, and predictable. These beings had perfected the art of running a galaxy. That's when the sensors started beeping. Commander Thalven paused mid-sentence as the alert reached his consciousness. Something was approaching Xerion Prime, something that wasn't supposed to be there. He expanded his awareness to touch the station's detection grid and immediately felt confused. The approaching vessel was tiny, barely larger than a shuttle. Its engines burned chemical fuel like something from a museum. The hull was made of simple metal alloys that any civilized species had abandoned millions of years ago. Primitive, he whispered to himself, the sound rippling through the energy field around him. Another young species seeking an audience. This happened sometimes. A civilization would develop space travel and detect their signals. They would come begging for membership, for protection, for guidance. The ancient beings had a process for this. First, they would be impressed by the sheer scale of what they faced. Then they would be overwhelmed by the technological gap. Finally, they would accept their place in the natural order and agree to limits on their development. Thalven began preparing the standard welcome protocols. The chamber would dim its lighting to seem less threatening. Translation systems would activate. A junior representative would escort the primitives to a small waiting area where they could be properly awed by holographic displays of the ancient civilization's achievements. The other species had noticed the approaching vessel too. Crystal formations on the Chronari flickered with mild interest. The Nebulites' gas clouds swirled a bit faster, but none of them seemed particularly concerned. After all, what could primitives do against beings who had mastered the fundamental forces of reality itself? Through the station's sensors, Thalven watched the crude vessel dock with one of the outer ports. Security systems automatically scanned it for weapons or threats. Nothing dangerous was detected, just 3 life forms with carbon-based biology and electromagnetic nervous systems. Standard primitive configuration. The docking bay filled with atmosphere suitable for the visitor's biology. Airlock systems activated with a soft hiss. Everything was proceeding exactly as it had thousands of times before with other young species. But something felt different this time. The 3 beings who emerged from their ship didn't move like primitives usually did. They weren't looking around in wonder at the advanced technology. They weren't huddled together in fear. Instead, They walked with steady confidence toward the main chamber, their movements calm and purposeful. Thalven felt the first stirring of something he hadn't experienced in millennia. Not quite concern, not quite curiosity, but something in between. These creatures seemed different somehow. They carried themselves like they belonged here, like they weren't impressed by what they saw. The ancient beings in the council chamber began to take notice as the three visitors approached. For the first time in a very long time, they were about to encounter something unexpected. The massive doors of the council chamber slid open with a sound like distant thunder. What walked through them changed everything the ancient beings thought they knew about first contact. Three humans entered wearing simple white environmental suits that looked like they were built in someone's garage. The suits were clean but clearly functional rather than impressive, with worn patches where equipment had been attached and removed countless times. The helmets were transparent, showing human faces that looked around the chamber with calm interest rather than the terror or worship that usually marked a species' first encounter with the galactic powers. The one in front was a man in his 40s with graying hair and steady blue eyes. He walked with the confident stride of someone used to command. Behind him, a woman with auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail carried a simple tablet device, her green eyes already scanning the chamber and taking mental notes. The third was a younger man with dark hair who moved with military precision, his hands relaxed at his sides but his posture alert. Captain Ben Clark stopped a respectful distance from a massive council table and removed his helmet. The chamber's atmosphere analyzers had already confirmed that humans could breathe the standard mixture used during council sessions. His companions followed suit, their movements efficient and practiced. "Good morning," Ben said in clear, unaccented English that the translation systems immediately converted to the various alien languages. "I'm Captain Ben Clark of the Earth Vessel Horizon. This is Dr. Kate Miller, our xenobiologist, and Lieutenant Ryan Hayes, our communications officer. We represent the United Earth Government." The silence that followed was unlike anything that had ever occurred in the Grand Council chamber. In the thousands of years since the ancient beings had established their order, no species had ever introduced themselves with such casual directness. Where was the stammering? The bowing? The desperate pleas for mercy or guidance? Commander Thalven's energy form flickered with confusion. His sensors were reading the humans' biological responses, and the data made no sense. Heart rates were elevated but steady, indicating alertness rather than panic. Adrenaline levels were normal. Most shocking of all, the brain activity patterns showed curiosity and careful observation, but not a trace of the overwhelming fear that every other primitive species had displayed. The crystalline chronari pulsed with colors that indicated bewilderment. Their towering forms had intimidated countless species into submission just by being present. Yet these tiny organic creatures seemed to view them as interesting rather than terrifying. Kate Miller pulled out her tablet and began making notes, her stylus moving across the screen with practiced efficiency. She was documenting everything she saw, from the energy patterns of the Veiltar to the crystalline structure of the chronari. Her expression was that of a scientist gathering data, not a primitive creature confronting gods. "We hope you don't mind if we observe your proceedings," Ben continued conversationally. "We've been monitoring galactic communications for several decades now, and we're very interested in learning how interstellar diplomacy works. We promise not to interrupt, but we might have a few questions afterward if that's acceptable." The ancient beings exchanged what could only be described as confused glances. Several of them attempted to access their historical databases, searching for any record of a species behaving this way during first contact. The searches returned no results. Ryan Hayes remained at attention, his military training evident in every line of his posture. But his eyes were active, cataloging defensive positions, exit routes, and potential threats with the calm professionalism of a career soldier. He wasn't preparing to flee or grovel. He was simply doing his job. The nebulites swirled faster, their gas-formed bodies betraying their agitation. In their collective memory spanning millions of years, primitives either worshipped them as gods or cowered in terror. These humans were doing neither. They were treating the most powerful beings in the galaxy like equals in a business meeting. "Please," Kate said politely, looking up from her tablet, "don't let us disturb you. We understand this is an important gathering, and we're honored to witness it. We've come a very long way to be here." Her tone was respectful, but not subservient. She spoke like a diplomat addressing foreign colleagues, not a primitive addressing her superiors. The ancient beings realized that these creatures genuinely viewed this as a meeting between equals, despite the obvious technological gap. Ben clasped his hands behind his back and took a small step to one side, positioning himself where he could observe without blocking anyone's view. "We're here to learn," he said simply. "Please, continue as if we weren't here." The most disturbing part for the ancient beings wasn't what the humans were doing. It was what they weren't doing. They weren't asking for protection. They weren't offering tribute. They weren't begging for membership or guidance. They were simply present, watching and learning. For the first time in millions of years, the ancient beings found themselves uncertain about how to proceed. Their carefully established protocols for dealing with primitive species had no framework for this situation. These humans weren't behaving like primitives at all. The chamber remained silent as 12 ancient civilizations tried to process this unprecedented development. The council chamber had returned to its usual rhythm of diplomatic discussion. The ancient beings had decided to proceed with their agenda, treating the human observers as a minor curiosity. Trade routes were being negotiated between the Veiled Tar and the crystalline mountain-sized Chronari when Kate Miller quietly raised her hand. The gesture was so simple, so ordinary, that it took several seconds for the ancient beings to notice. When they did, a strange ripple of attention passed through the chamber. No primitive species had ever interrupted their proceedings before. They had always sat in awed silence, overwhelmed by the scope of what they were witnessing. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Kate said politely, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems. "But I have a question about the Chronari expansion into the Helix systems that was just discussed." The towering crystal beings pulsed with colors that indicated mild surprise. Their representative, a creature that looked like a living mountain of purple and gold gems, turned its attention to the small human woman. When it spoke, its voice resonated like wind chimes in a storm. "You may ask, small being." Kate consulted her tablet, her fingers moving across the screen with practiced efficiency. "Your expansion reports mention 14 worlds in the Helix systems that were classified as naturally uninhabited when your people arrived. But our deep space scans detected extensive fossilized remains of cities on all 14 planets." The chamber became very quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when someone asks exactly the wrong question at exactly the wrong time. Ryan Hayes, still standing at attention, added in his measured military voice, "The architectural patterns suggest the civilizations were at roughly the same technological level when they all went extinct. The timing appears to have been simultaneous across all 14 worlds, which is unusual for natural disasters." Ben Clark looked up from his own tablet, his expression thoughtful. "We found similar patterns in the energy harvesting operations the Veiled Tar mentioned. The radiation signatures we detected on several worlds in that sector matched the residual energy from your harvesting technology quite precisely." Commander Thalven's energy form flickered rapidly, betraying his agitation. "You have been scanning our territories?" "We've been exploring this region of space for the past 30 years, Ben replied matter-of-factly. "Standard survey missions. We always scan for signs of life, both current and historical. It's basic scientific protocol." Kate turned a page on her tablet. Her green eyes focused on the data. "What we found was fascinating from an archaeological perspective. Across 47 different star systems, we discovered evidence of civilizations that all reached the same approximate technological threshold before going extinct." She looked up at the ancient beings with genuine scientific curiosity. "The threshold appears to be early faster-than-light travel capability. Every extinct species we found had achieved basic space travel and was just beginning to explore beyond their home systems when they suddenly vanished." Ryan's military training showed as he recited statistics with perfect precision. "The timeline is remarkably consistent. In every case, extinction occurred within 50 years of achieving interstellar flight capability. The statistical probability of this being natural is essentially zero." The ancient beings were no longer discussing trade routes. Every consciousness in the chamber was focused on the three humans who were calmly dismantling millions of years of carefully constructed narratives. Ben scrolled through more data on his tablet. We also noticed an interesting demographic pattern in this sector of the galaxy. There are no species younger than 100,000 years. Not one. In a region containing thousands of star systems with suitable planets for life development. Kate nodded, adding her own observations. From an evolutionary biology standpoint, that's impossible. New species should be emerging constantly. The fact that they're not suggests some kind of selective pressure that prevents younger civilizations from surviving their technological adolescence. The silence in the chamber had become oppressive. The ancient beings were beginning to realize that these humans hadn't come seeking guidance or protection. They had come with evidence. Rye maintained his professional tone as he continued. The energy weapon signatures we found on the extinct worlds are particularly interesting. They don't match any natural phenomena in our databases, but they do show remarkable similarities to the defensive systems we've observed on your ships and stations. The pattern suggests systematic intervention, Kate said, her scientist mind working through the implications. Something or someone has been preventing younger species from developing beyond a certain point for millions of years. Ben looked up from his tablet and made direct eye contact with Commander Thalven's shifting energy form. We're curious about who might be responsible for maintaining this pattern, and why they would consider it necessary. The ancient beings realized with growing horror that these humans weren't just asking random questions. They were presenting a carefully constructed case, piece by piece, leading to an inevitable conclusion. The dots that were never meant to be connected were being methodically linked together by minds that refused to be intimidated or misdirected. For the first time in millions of years, the rulers of the galaxy found themselves being investigated, and they were beginning to understand that the investigators already knew exactly what they would find. Kate Miller stood up slowly, her movements deliberate and calm. The tablet in her hand seemed almost primitive compared to the advanced technology surrounding them, but what it contained would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. She touched the screen, and a three-dimensional holographic display materialized in the center of the chamber. The ancient beings watched as a star map appeared, showing dozens of solar systems scattered across their region of space. Each system was marked with symbols and dates that told a story none of them wanted to hear. "Ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished beings," Kate began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent decades studying the evidence she was about to present. "What you're seeing is a result of 30 years of archaeological surveys conducted by Earth expeditions across this sector. The first image that appeared showed the fossilized remains of a city on a world orbiting a distant star. The buildings were tall and elegant, clearly the work of an advanced civilization, but they were covered in layers of sediment that spoke of sudden, catastrophic destruction. This is planet designation XK, 47 in the Helix systems." Kate continued. "Carbon dating shows the civilization was thriving approximately 2 million years ago. They had developed faster-than-light communication, early space travel, and were beginning to establish colonies on nearby worlds." The image shifted to show weapon impact craters, their edges still sharp and clear despite the passage of time. These energy weapon signatures are remarkably well preserved. The attack was sudden, complete, and highly efficient. Every major population center was eliminated within a matter of hours. Ben Clark remained seated, but his attention was completely focused on Kate's presentation. He had seen this evidence countless times during their preparation, but watching the ancient beings' reactions made it feel new and urgent all over again. The hologram changed to show another world, then another, each one telling the same terrible story. Civilizations that had reached for the stars only to be cut down just as they were about to join the galactic community. 47 worlds, Kate said, her voice steady despite the weight of what she was revealing. 47 different species, all extinct, all eliminated at precisely the same point in their technological development. Commander Thalven's energy form was flickering rapidly now, colors shifting through spectrums that indicated deep distress. The Chronari's crystalline bodies had dimmed to almost black, while the nebulites had contracted into tight, defensive formations. Kate touched her tablet again, and a timeline appeared showing the extinction events across millions of years. The pattern is remarkably consistent. Each species is allowed to develop naturally until they achieve faster-than-light travel capability. Then, within an average of 37 years, they vanish completely. Ryan Hayes stepped forward slightly, his military training evident in how he presented the tactical analysis. The methods used vary depending on the target species. Asteroid impact for worlds with strong planetary defenses. Engineered plagues for species with advanced medical technology. Direct energy weapon for those who develop too quickly to be stopped by subtler means. The hologram now showed comparison charts of weapon signatures found on the dead worlds. The patterns were unmistakable, matching the defensive systems and technology signatures of the ancient civilizations sitting in judgment. But here's what's most interesting, Kate continued, zooming in on specific data points. The attacks are always precise, always complete, and always timed perfectly. This level of coordination and intelligence gathering suggests a systematic program of elimination that has been operating for millions of years. She paused, letting the implication sink in. Someone has been watching younger species develop. Someone has been cataloging their progress, monitoring their advancement, and intervening at exactly the right moment to prevent them from becoming a threat. The chamber was completely silent now. Even the usual background hum of the station system seemed muted, as if the technology itself was holding its breath. Ben stood up slowly, his tablet tucked under his arm. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but carried clearly through the vast chamber. We know what you've been doing. All of you. For millions of years, you've been systematically eliminating any species that might challenge your dominance. Kate added more images to the hologram, showing the territorial divisions of the ancient civilizations and how they perfectly matched the extinction zones. The evidence is overwhelming. The weapon signatures, the timing, the territorial correlations. You've divided the galaxy between yourselves and eliminated anyone who might upset that balance. Ryan's voice carried the cold professionalism of a military briefer, delivering a threat assessment. 63 extinct civilizations that we found so far. Probably hundreds more that we haven't discovered yet, all eliminated by the species sitting in this chamber. Ben walked closer to the council table, his expression calm, but his eyes hard. The question isn't whether you did it. We have proof. The question is what happens now that you know we know. The ancient beings sat in stunned silence, faced with evidence they couldn't deny and accusations they couldn't deflect. For the first time in millions of years, they were being held accountable for their actions. And the humans weren't finished yet. The silence that filled the Grand Council chamber was unlike anything that had existed there before. It wasn't the comfortable quiet of beings who controlled the galaxy discussing routine matters. It wasn't even the shocked silence of creatures caught in wrongdoing. This was something far more terrifying for the ancient civilizations. This was the silence of predators realizing they had become prey. Commander Thalven's energy form had stopped flickering entirely, frozen in a pattern that spoke of complete disbelief. The Chronari's crystal bodies had gone completely dark, their usual soft glow extinguished for the first time in recorded history. The nebulites had compressed themselves into tight, defensive clouds, instinctively preparing for an attack that might never come. They were all thinking the same impossible thought. Humanity should have been eliminated decades ago. The moment Earth's first radio signals reached space, monitoring systems should have detected them. The moment humans developed nuclear weapons, intervention protocols should have activated. When they launched their first satellites, the countdown to extinction should have begun. But somehow, impossibly, humans had slipped through every safety net the ancient beings had constructed over millions of years. Ben Clark stood in the center of the chamber, his posture relaxed, but his presence commanding attention. He looked around at the towering alien beings who had ruled the galaxy since before his species had even evolved, and his expression was calm, almost gentle. "We know you tried," he said quietly. "We found the evidence on Mars. The asteroid you redirected toward Earth 65 million years ago. The one that killed the dinosaurs and reset evolution on our planet." The ancient beings felt something they hadn't experienced in eons. Fear. "You probably thought that would be enough," Kate added, closing her tablet with a soft click. "Reset the dominant species. Buy yourself another 100 million years before intelligence evolved again. It was a good plan." Ryan Hayes stepped forward slightly, his military bearing evident in every movement. But you underestimated how resilient life could be, and you definitely underestimated humans. Ben reached into his environmental suit and pulled out a small device no larger than his palm. To the ancient being's sensors, it looked like primitive human technology, but something about it made their advanced detection systems scream warnings. "This is a quantum communicator," Ben said, holding the device casually. "Right now, it's connected to similar devices on Earth and in 14 hidden colonies scattered across this region of space. If we don't report back safely, certain information gets released to some very interesting people." Kate smiled, and it wasn't a particularly pleasant expression. "We've shared our archaeological findings with 47 different emerging civilizations, species that are just beginning to reach for space travel. They now know exactly what to watch for, exactly what signs indicate they're about to be eliminated." The implications hit the ancient beings like a physical blow. Their entire system of control depended on younger species being isolated, ignorant, and unprepared. If emerging civilizations knew what was coming, if they could prepare defenses and coordinate responses, Ryan's voice carried the cold certainty of a soldier delivering an ultimatum. Earth's governments have spent the last 30 years preparing for this moment. Our colonies are hidden using technology you don't even know we possess. Our defensive systems are based on studying the weapon signatures you've been using for millions of years. Ben put the communicator away and clasped his hands behind his back. "We can't be eliminated like the others. We're too spread out, too well hidden, too well prepared. And most importantly, too many people already know the truth." The ancient beings were beginning to understand the scope of what they faced. This wasn't just first contact with an unusually bold species. This was a complete overthrow of the galactic order they had maintained for millions of years. Kate walked toward the chamber doors, her footsteps echoing in the oppressive silence. The old rules are finished. No more young species mysteriously disappearing. No more convenient accidents when civilizations develop space travel. No more systematic genocide disguised as natural selection. Ben followed her, pausing only to look back at the frozen alien beings. "We're not here to destroy you. We're not even here to punish you, though frankly, you deserve it. We're here to change things." Ryan brought up the rear, his soldiers' instincts keeping him alert even as they prepared to leave. "Consider this your notification that the galaxy has new management. The age of ancient civilizations eliminating their competition is over." As the three humans walked toward the chamber doors, their footsteps seemed to echo with finality. Behind them, 12 ancient civilizations sat in complete shock, processing the reality of their new situation. For millions of years, they had been the apex predators of the galaxy. They had controlled every aspect of galactic development, deciding which species lived and which ones died. They had been gods among insects, shapers of destiny itself. Now they were just very old beings who had been caught committing murder on an unimaginable scale. And the species that had exposed them was walking away, confident and untouchable. The chamber doors closed with a soft hiss, leaving the ancient beings alone with the ruins of their carefully constructed world order. The age of unchallenged dominance was over, and everyone in the chamber knew it. The humans had won without firing a single shot.